Okay, so we're diving straight in today with some material that a listener sent our way.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and it's it's pretty hard-hitting stuff.
Okay.
It's basically arguing that all those excuses that we all have,
Yeah.
about why we haven't done things or why we can't do things,
Oh, yeah. We all have.
are fundamentally untrue.
Hmm.
And so we're going to be having like a direct conversation with you about your potential
Okay.
and the invisible walls that these excuses might be building
I like it.
around that potential.
Yeah. So the material that you sent is giving us a really clear mission for this deep dive to really get under the skin of these excuses. You
Yeah.
know, like where do they even come from?
Yeah.
What's the psychology behind them?
Mm-hmm.
And most importantly, what are some like real world practical ways that you can start dismantling them?
Yeah.
So this isn't about pointing fingers.
Right.
It's about giving knowledge and some practical steps you can take to grow.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. And the central point that this material makes is this.
Okay.
Your excuses are lying to you.
Mm.
Straight up.
Wow.
These aren't little white lies.
Right.
These are often like straight up falsehoods that you've unknowingly accepted as your reality.
And the material even gives us like a roadmap,
Nice.
of these common categories of excuses that I think we all fall into.
Okay, like what?
Like, I don't have time.
Yeah.
Or I'm not ready, or I'm too tired.
Oh, yeah.
Or I'm just not good enough.
Ugh, the classics.
Yeah. And so we're going to dig into all of that with you.
Love it.
Let's start with like the very nature of excuses.
Okay.
The material kind of emphasizes how these repeated stories we tell ourselves can actually like solidify into what we perceive as truth.
Totally.
And these become limiting beliefs that unconsciously kind of steer our actions or inaction.
Yeah, it's like, an excuse repeated often enough becomes like a prison that you build for yourself.
Yeah. Right.
So it starts off as a way to like explain a situation.
Right.
But then over time it hardens into this belief about what is even possible for you.
Right.
And this material, really highlights how excuses offer comfort.
Yeah.
They're like a shield to protect us from that potential discomfort of trying and maybe failing.
Right.
But here's the thing.
Okay.
This comfort comes at the cost of progress.
Mm-hmm.
So you end up kind of staying stuck.
Right.
While your potential is just like sitting there untapped.
You say these things enough times, you start to believe them.
Totally.
And then suddenly you've got this whole narrative that dictates what you can and can't do. It's like we're building a case against ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what's so interesting, I think that the text points this out so well, is that there's this subtle power shift happening.
Oh, interesting.
When we accept these excuses, we're basically handing over control. We're letting this internal monologue define our boundaries.
Right.
Rather than actively shaping our own reality.
Yeah, you're giving away your power, essentially.
Yeah, and the material is really direct about this.
Oh, wow.
Each time you give an excuse airtime, you are surrendering a piece of your own agency.
That's powerful.
So let's get into the why.
Okay, the why.
Why are we so prone to making these excuses in the first place?
Right.
So the material kind of delves into this underlying psychology.
Yeah.
And it says that it's not about some inherent flaw, or laziness, but it's actually really deeply rooted in our brain's fundamental wiring, our natural drive to avoid discomfort, to conserve energy, to seek safety.
Yeah, so like change growth, stepping into the unknown.
Yeah.
That can trigger all these ancient alarm systems in us.
But it's like our brains are these incredibly efficient operating systems, that are constantly looking for the path of least resistance.
Yeah, just coasting.
Yeah, and so they see potential challenges, and they're like, whoa, that looks like effort.
Too much work.
That looks like risk.
Danger.
Let's just stick to what we know.
Yeah, what's familiar and safe.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where this concept of the inner excuse machine comes in.
Ooh, inner excuse machine.
Yeah, I love that.
What is that?
So think of it like this. You have this program running in the background of your mind that is constantly generating reasons. Seemingly logical reasons. Why you shouldn't do something.
Oh, fun.
Or why you can't do something.
Right.
And so this is that voice in your head that's always coming up with excuses for why you can't or shouldn't do things.
And so if you're not consciously aware of it and actively pushing back, it can become really dominant.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like calling the shots.
It's running the show.
Yeah, it's keeping you chained to the familiar.
Yeah, totally.
So the material then moves on to like dissecting some of these like go-to excuses.
Okay.
You know?
Probably classics.
Yeah, the all-stars of self-sabotage.
Let's hear them.
Okay, so let's tackle the ever-popular I don't have time.
Oh my gosh, the best one.
Right.
Yeah.
What's the material say about that one?
So what's cool here is how the material like reframes this excuse.
Okay.
It suggests that it's less about a literal shortage of time.
Okay.
And more about your priorities and how intentionally you're using the hours in your day.
So it's not that we don't have time.
Right.
It's that we're not spending it the right way.
Exactly. And the material challenges you to really scrutinize your time.
Okay.
Where are those pockets of time disappearing to?
Right.
You know, could they be used for your goals instead?
Oh, interesting.
And here's like a key insight that the material gives.
Okay.
It says that the no time excuse is less about the clock and more about what you're choosing to put on it.
Okay.
So every no you say to your goal is a yes to something else.
Oof.
So what are those yeses costing you?
It's a question of what truly matters.
Yeah.
And whether your actions are actually reflecting your values.
I love that.
And then there's another classic that I know I have definitely leaned on.
Oh, yeah. Which one?
I'm not ready.
Oh, yeah. We've all been there.
Right.
So what does the material say about that one?
So the source material kind of confronts this head on and says that this idea of being ready is often a mirage, or at least that it doesn't come before the action.
Oh.
It usually follows it.
Interesting.
So this notion of waiting for like the perfect alignment of circumstances
Right.
is often just procrastination in disguise.
Makes sense.
And the text actually encourages you to like...
To what?
Start messy.
Okay.
Start scared. Start anyway.
I love that.
Because it's in the very act of doing that you begin to cultivate the skills and the confidence that you're waiting for. Like you don't learn to swim by standing at the edge of the pool.
That's a good one.
You know?
Yeah, you got to jump in.
Yeah, you have to just jump in.
Totally.
Another excuse we hear a lot, and I know I feel this one a lot.
Oh, tell me.
I'm too tired.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You know?
What does the material say about that one?
It draws this distinction between physical fatigue and mental fatigue.
Right.
And it suggests that oftentimes when we say we're exhausted, what we're actually experiencing is a lack of inspiration or motivation. You know, when you're genuinely engaged and passionate about something, that very spark can generate energy. Right. You know, so it's worth considering, like, is this feeling of tiredness a true physical limitation? Or is it a sign that you're not truly connected to what you're contemplating doing?
So it's like that our brains are wired for survival. You know?
Right.
It's like ingrained in us, in our amygdala, which flags anything that's unfamiliar as potentially risky.
Yeah.
So it's like our inner excuse machine isn't trying to be difficult.
Right.
It's trying to protect us.
Right. It just wants to keep us safe.
In its own outdated way,
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes, you know, pushing through that initial mental resistance can actually be really energizing.
For sure.
And then there's like this one that's really insidious.
Okay.
You know, this can be a real dream killer.
Tell me.
I'm not good enough.
Oh, yeah. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
What does the source material say about that?
So the material counters this by saying that mastery is a journey.
Oh.
It's a process of continuous learning and growth. It's not some innate starting point.
Yeah.
Everyone starts somewhere.
Right.
And the people who ultimately excel are simply the ones who persist through those feelings of inadequacy.
Yeah.
So not good enough isn't a factual statement about your ability. It's a limiting belief that you're telling yourself.
Right.
That's preventing you from even taking the first step.
Towards getting better.
Yeah.
So the text then shifts focus a little bit to what it calls the comfort zone trap. And it talks about, you know, what happens when you stay in your comfort zone.
Right.
What are the consequences of staying within those boundaries? And
so what it says is that the comfort zone is not this like fixed static space.
Okay.
You know, it's not.
Yeah.
The more you're in it, the more it constricts. Yeah. So your world shrinks.
Right.
You have fewer experiences.
Yeah.
And ultimately the text argues you're not really expanding, you're not evolving, you're just existing.
It's like a muscle that isn't used.
Yes.
It starts to atrophy.
Right.
You get weaker.
The less we challenge ourselves, the less capable we become of handling new situations.
Totally.
Difficult situations.
Exactly.
So the material really underscores that genuine growth. The kind that leads to real personal development. occurs in those moments of resistance when things feel challenging and yes, uncomfortable.
Right.
It's in pushing through those feelings that we become stronger and we uncover capabilities that we didn't even know we had.
Totally.
Avoiding discomfort offers this temporary ease.
Right.
But it ultimately prevents us from reaching our full potential.
It holds us back.
Yeah.
So we see how, staying in our comfort zone limits us.
Right.
But the material argues that these limitations often stem from something even deeper.
Ooh, what's that?
How we see ourselves. And this brings us to the crucial question of identity.
Okay, so this leads to this really powerful question that the material poses.
Yeah.
Who are you without your excuses?
Ooh, I like that.
It's essentially asking you to strip away all the justifications, all the limitations that you've been carrying around.
What's left?
And this is where the conversation takes a really interesting turn. The text suggests that excuses are often woven into our self-perception, into how we define ourselves, rather than just being about external circumstances.
Right.
So it urges you to really examine who you believe yourself to be.
Yeah.
And how those beliefs might be fueling your tendency to make excuses.
So look inward and ask, what's the story I'm telling myself about who I am and what I'm capable of?
Yeah, it's like our internal branding. If we've branded ourselves as someone who struggles with time management, then the excuse, I don't have time, is part of that brand.
Totally.
And the material gives some really practical examples of shifting these identity statements. So moving away from an excuse-driven mindset, I'm someone who tries, to a more action-oriented declaration. I'm someone who follows through.
I like that. Yeah.
It's about consciously choosing a new narrative for yourself. And the text emphasizes that every decision you make, every action you take or don't take, is a vote for the kind of person you are becoming.
That's powerful.
Yeah. Every choice, big or small, is a vote for your future self.
I like that.
And then the text takes a very direct approach.
Okay. How so?
It puts some common excuses on trial, so to speak.
Let's do it.
Let's run through a few.
Okay.
So I think a lot of people can relate to this one.
Oh.
I'll start when things calm down.
Oh, yeah.
We're all waiting for this mythical period of calm.
Totally.
What's the material say?
The material says, look, the reality is life rarely, if ever, reaches a state of permanent calm.
That's true.
There are always going to be challenges.
Right.
Unexpected events, unpredictability.
Right.
So waiting for things to be perfect is just another way of putting things off.
Right.
The key is learning to navigate the chaos.
Right.
And take action anyway.
There's another one that we hear all the time.
Okay.
And it feels so valid.
What is it?
I don't know how.
Oh, yeah. I've used that one.
Yeah. And the text counters this by saying, we have unprecedented access to information.
That's true.
Whether it's online resources, books, mentors.
Yeah.
You can ask for guidance. So the knowledge is usually readily available.
It's out there.
Yeah, I don't know how. Often just means I haven't taken the initiative to find out.
Or maybe they're afraid to feel vulnerable.
Or there's a fear of vulnerability.
Yeah, while they're learning something new.
Exactly.
Okay.
Then there's this really deeply rooted fear that can just stop us dead in our tracks.
Tell me.
What if I fail?
Ooh, that's a big one.
It can be so paralyzing.
What does the material say about that?
So the material says that failure is not only a possibility, it's an indispensable part of the journey towards success.
Okay.
So it's not the opposite of achievement. It's a crucial stepping stone.
Right.
So if you avoid failure at all costs, you're missing opportunities to learn and grow.
Makes sense.
And that's ultimately what leads to success.
Okay, so failure is part of the process.
Yeah, and then finally there's the ever elusive right time.
Yeah, I'm waiting for that.
It feels so dependent on circumstance,
Right. Like the stars have to align.
Yeah, exactly.
So what does the material say?
The material says that time doesn't magically conjure opportunities.
Okay.
Action does. So waiting for that perfect moment is a way of delaying the inevitable, the act of starting, taking that initial step. That's what creates the right circumstances.
I like that.
And often illuminates the next step forward.
Okay, so don't wait, just start.
Exactly.
Right.
And then the material wraps up with this really interesting, practical, mental exercise.
I love these.
I know, right?
What is it? It's something you can do right now.
Okay.
It's called firing your excuse voice.
Oh.
That's a good one.
What's so powerful about this is this personification. So you visualize that voice of excuse, maybe give it a name, imagine its tone, its mannerisms, and so you create the separation between that voice and your true self.
Yeah.
And then you mentally fire it.
Oh, I love that.
You dismiss its negativity.
That's great.
And it's such a potent way to disrupt that ingrained pattern of negative self-talk.
Like you're taking back the microphone in your own head.
And you're silencing that excuse-making voice. Yeah. And you're reinforcing that you are not defined by these limitations.
Love it.
It's a reminder that you have the power to choose which voices to listen to.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
So to sum it all up for you,
the
core message here is that the excuses you've been telling yourself aren't just harmless fibs. They're holding you back from reaching your potential.
And the takeaway, the empowering takeaway, is that you have the ability to recognize them for what they are.
Which is?
Lies.
Yes.
And to reject them.
So here's a final thought for you.
Okay.
Now that you've mentally fired that excuse voice, what is one small but meaningful action you can take today that you've been putting off?
Right.
What new truth about yourself might that action reveal? We encourage you to challenge one persistent excuse in your life right now.
Awesome.
And see what happens.
Great advice.
Thanks.
Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, this was a good one.
It was.
All right, we'll see everybody next time.
See ya.